Hello and welcome to yet another event under the Unlocking Heritage series of Kala Ghoda Arts Festival 2021. My name is Bharat Gotoskar. I am the founder of Khaki Tours, a company that curates over 50 heritage walks in Mumbai. Today we are going to go to the original arts district of Mumbai, not Kala Ghoda, but Girgaon. Taking you on this journey is Dr. Mrigank Warrier. No, he is not a PhD in arts, but he's a medical doctor who gave it up all to become a journalist. He loves to walk around aimlessly in Mumbai, or actually, it is the colonial Bombay. Passionate about classical music and theatre, interested in getting Mumbaikars to walk around and explore parts of their own city. He is an integral part of Team Khaki and curates over 3 to 4 different walks in this area, which he is going to talk about. Currently, he is not in Mumbai and hence is presenting directly from Palakkad. Just a request to all the viewers, please type out your questions in the chat box, which I'll collate and ask Mrigank at the end of this walk. Talk. So over to Mrigank.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me in the middle of a weekday for a talk at the heart of art. Not Kala Ghoda, but Girgaon. Not all of us are experts on art. I certainly am not, but we all love stories, and it's just stories that I'm going to tell today. So let's start with the ones that we already know. If you visited the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival before, or if you're an art lover, or if you just enjoy walking around South Bombay aimlessly, you must be familiar with this building, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, formerly known as the Prince of Wales Museum. Right next to the museum is the Jehangir Art Gallery, and opposite the museum is the National Gallery of Modern Art. I'm sure you can picture these three buildings very close to each other. Perhaps you've even been inside them, spending a Sunday afternoon exploring art. I'm sure you've clicked photos with the public art installations that line the road during the Kala Ghoda Art Festival. And if you're a regular at Kala Ghoda, you might even have purchased a few paintings from the artists who display their work on the footpath outside Jehangir Art Gallery. It is all these elements, along with a few small art galleries in the streets tucked away from Kala Ghoda, that have combined to make Kala Ghoda the arts district of Bombay. But let me ask you a question. Is an art district the area where art is created or where art is displayed? To answer that question, we need to ask ourselves another. Is Kala Ghoda is full of museums and galleries, which makes Kala Ghoda a museum and gallery district. The question that I want to ask is art only about painting and about sculpture? Is there nothing more to art? Why is it then that when we think of art, we only think of the fine arts and never about the performing arts? Are music, dance, theater, acting, filmmaking, photography not forms of art? And if they are, where then is Mumbai's art district? Is it in Parel, where hundreds of workshops to make Ganpati idols come up during Ganesh Chaturthi? Is it at Tulsi Pipe Road, where the walls along Tulsi Pipe Road in Mahim are lined by kilometers and kilometers of graffiti and murals? Or is it in Yari Road and Versova with those tiny little performance venues for both amateurs and professionals? I can't answer that question, but the question I can try and answer is, where is Mumbai's original art district? To start that story, we'll need to take a little detour. Look at the map in front of you. It shows a part of the area of Bombay that we refer to as Fort. Now look at the area within the red square. All the museums of Kala Ghoda, all the art galleries of Kala Ghoda are within that small area. Now, let's take a 10-minute walk away from Kala Ghoda to the area that we now call Horniman Circle. Before these familiar crescent-shaped buildings came up, this area was a vast open ground called the Bombay Green. Can you see that? There's absolutely nothing there in the center apart from a small monument. And it is at the Bombay Green where the Dena Bank building now stands, came up the first venue for art in Bombay, a theater facing the Bombay Green, simply called the theatre on the green. In the early days of the British East India Company, the British could not afford to pay for European entertainers to travel all the way from Europe and come to Bombay to perform here. Instead, British civil servants who would dress oh so formally and go to work at offices in the day would put on costumes at night and perform amateur productions for their own wives and children. Take a good look at the map in front of you now. On the left, can you see Malabar Hill and Walkeshwar jutting out into the sea? To the right, towards the top, can you see the dense grey areas where middle-class Mumbaikars built their homes in Girgaon and Dongri? Now, look at the red circle at the bottom of the map. Do you see the red circle? That is where the theatre on the green was located, essentially where Parliament Circle is right now. While the theatre on the green no longer survives, its spirit moved north to an area that we call Grant Road. Look at where the arrow is pointing. Do you see that there are fewer houses? There is lesser construction there. The question is, even though the theatre moved north, who gave the theatre a new home? You know of Jamshedji Jijiboy from the many, many institutions named after him. The JDA School of Art, the JDA Hospital, and so on. And if you're driving down the main road of Girgaon, or if you take the Dadar TT flyover, what you're doing is going over the Jagannath Shankar Shet road in Girgaon and taking the Jagannath Shankar Shet flyover. It is these two city fathers who donated land and money to build a new theatre at Grant Road, a grand structure called the Grant Road Theatre. Since the Grant Road Theatre is where plays were performed, it simply came to be known as the Playhouse. You can see for yourself the rows and rows of seats, levels of balconies, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and a very well-dressed audience that is looking right at us. Let's go back to the map. Look at the area with the big rectangular box. The Playhouse was on the outskirts of Bombay. Around the Playhouse is where the garbage, the rubbish of the city would be dumped. If a British gentleman set out from Fort in his carriage to watch something at the Playhouse, chances were very high that he would be attacked by robbers on the way and left high and dry. Which is why, while the Playhouse started off as a house of entertainment for the British soon preferred to patronize theatres that were closer to the fort area, which is where they lived. Some of these theatres still survive. You see the now shuttered Capital Cinema as soon as you exit CST station. It started off as a theatre called the Gaiety. Nearby is the Empire, which was nearby is the New Empire, which was once just called the Empire. And just down the road is the New Excelsior, once a theatre called Novelty, which has now rebranded itself as a multiplex and continues to survive. While these theatres near the port area became the hub of entertainment for the British, the Playhouse in Grant Road became the home of entertainment for Indians. I'm going to pause for a minute. Take a good look at this map. This is the last time we're going to see it, because what we're going to do now is we're going to zoom in to the area that is just within that red box. Taking a good look. This map shows the area within that red box. If you look for Chowpatty, you will be able to orient yourself better. Can you see the dotted black line which represents the Western Railway that is curving through the map? Yes. The black box that you see marks where Grant Road Station is. So Bombay Central Station is beyond the upper border of the map, and Churni Road Station is just below the lower border of the map. The road that is running horizontally just below Grant Road Station in the map was called Grant Road. It is the road that gives the name to the station and not the other way around. But have you noticed the red dot that has been staring at you? That red dot marks the location of the Playhouse or the Grant Road Theatre right on Grant Road itself. While the Playhouse was still catering mostly to a European audience, a man named Vishnudas Bhave, who was the courtier of the Maharaja of Sangli, wrote and staged the first modern Marathi play in Sangli itself. He took away the element of dance from a folk presentation and wrote and staged what was the first Sangeet Natak, or a musical play, which became the template for plays to come for all the years after that. 10 years after this, he happened to be in Bombay and caught a performance of a play at the Grant Road Theatre itself. This inspired him to stage a play of his own at the Playhouse called Gopi Chand. This play, Gopi Chand, was the first Indian play in Bombay to be staged on a formal stage and to be ticketed. This was a revolution in terms of accessibility. Anyone who could afford the price of the ticket could attend the play, even you and me, if we were around back then. Parsi and Gujarati productions followed the Marathi ones, and the area around the Playhouse began to be known as Playhouse. But the Indians pronounced it as Tila House because they couldn't say Playhouse. As you can see, the name Playhouse still survives on the bus stop in the area. Sadly, the Playhouse Theatre no longer exists. A residential building now occupies the site. There isn't even a plaque to commemorate the location of one of the most important sites of Bombay's entertainment history. Back to the map. Do you see the red dot? That's the Playhouse. For a long time, the Playhouse stood by itself, all alone, without any theatres around it. It took some time for other theatres to come up in the area. Why? Because artists and entertainers depended upon royal patronage and the wealth of wealthy businessmen to support them in their art. Most of feudal India's wealth was distributed across the country, which is why the artists lived and practiced their art not in Bombay, but in princely states across the country. This began to change because the British East India Company began to annex and take over these princely states. Without princes who could support them financially, the artists, some of them began to migrate from these princely states to the richest province of India at the time. Not Bombay, but Bengal. This is a still from the Satyajit Ray Bengali film Jalsa Ghar, which shows the great Thumri legend Begum Akhtar performing for a rich Bengali zamindar and his guests. So for a while, it was Calcutta that became the epicenter of Indian art. However, 3 events took place that took this position away from Calcutta. The first was the coming of the railways. Do you see the ladies and gentlemen in the picture patiently waiting for a train at a humble station platform? Bombay won the race for the first railway line in India. This railway line made it possible to transport goods from the interiors of the country to the port of Bombay, from where it would be shipped across the world. It also made it more affordable and safe for artists and entertainers to travel from the interiors of Bombay to come and perform in Bombay. The second event was a cotton boom. Do you see the bales and bales of cotton in the picture? The United States, which had traditionally supplied cotton to Britain, was at war with itself. Because of the American Civil War, the demand for Indian cotton in Britain suddenly increased. 160 years ago, much of that cotton which was going to Britain passed through Bombay and brought with it an amount of wealth, a tremendous amount of wealth, the likes of which the city had never seen before. The third and final event was the opening of the Suez Canal. This made it possible for the sea route from Britain to Bombay to be much shorter than the sea route from Britain to London. Bombay became British India's most important port for trade and hence, naturally, also its commercial capital. Bombay became Urbs Prima in Indus, the foremost city of India. When the wealth came to Bombay, the artists and entertainers from across the country, also from Calcutta, also followed that wealth to Bombay in search of deposed princes and newly rich businessmen who could patronize their art. And the Playhouse, which once stood all alone, all by itself, became the nucleus for more structures, more theaters, more performance venues, more studios, and more residences of artists that began to come up around it. This gave birth to the original art and entertainment district of Bombay. This district was located at a geographical sweet spot. Look at that red dot. That's where the playhouse was. Look how close it is to the homes of the middle class masses in Dongri and Girgaon on one side, and also to the wealthy Indian classes who had begun to settle on Malabar Hill on the other. It's a perfect location for the development of an entertainment district for Indians. It is a small slice of this area that we are going to explore today, in and around Girgaon. Within this small parcel of land, we will talk about artists who not only lived and worked in close proximity, but also taught, encouraged, and inspired each other to higher and higher levels of creative achievement. From now on, this talk also becomes a walk. So keep an eye on that red dot because it's going to move all over the map. Yeah, let's get started. Let's start with what we know. If you're standing at Chowpatty and you have your back to the sea, you will see the road on the left. And if you go just up the road, you'll come to Sukh Sagar Hotel and the very famous Kulfi Wala right next to it. Just down this line of buildings was the studio of a photographer who clicked an image that you will identify as soon as you see it. The photographer's name was D.D. Niroy. And for many years, he'd been trying to persuade his guru to allow him to click a photo of him. The guru always refused until finally he relented. The photo of the guru that D.D. Niroy took was this one. Niroy's guru was Sai Baba of Shirdi. Can you see Niroy's photo at the bottom right? Now go and look at your own photograph of Sai Baba if you have it. Perhaps Niroy's signature does not exist anymore because most photos just crop out the signature and the name of the man responsible for this historic image. The original photo, which Niroy got framed, is in Shirdi and is kept just behind the stone on which Sai Baba was sitting when Niroy took his photo. But a copy of the photo still survives in Bombay, in Niroy's studio, where his granddaughter now runs a gallery. And every Thursday, Mumbaikars still come to perform an aarti for the portrait of Niroy's portrait of Sai Baba in Bombay. Look at the red dot. Can you see it's changed color? It's become gray, and then there's a new red dot. Let's follow the arrow. Let's cross the railway line. A few minutes walk away from Niroy's studio is actually the studio of a family of sculptors called Talim. For many years, sculptors had been trying to create an idol of Sai Baba, but always failed. This is because a sculptor also needs a side view of the subject, while Niroy's photo was only a front view. Legend has it that one night, Sai Baba himself came in the dreams of Bibi Talim in profile. It gave him the side view that he needed. Talim rejected samples of marble that had been sent from Rajasthan quarries. After a while, suddenly somebody informed him about a block of Italian marble lying abandoned at the Bombay docks. He found it perfect and he started working on a sculpture that immortalized both him and his subject. The idol of Sai Baba at Shirdi itself, crafted right here in Bombay, where the red dot is. The Talim family, the fourth generation of the Talim family, continues to take forward the legacy of sculpture. The Talim family has created about 1,500 idols of Sai Baba until this date, many of them from the original cast that was used for the original statue, which still survives in Talim Art Studio. Talim was taught at the JJ School of Arts by this man, Ganpat Rao Mhatre. Mhatre later had his studio at the Sukh Sagar building and was once a student at the JJ School of Arts himself. At the JJ School of Arts, one of Mhatre's teachers was Lockwood Kipling, the father of Rudyard Kipling. You can see both of them in the photo. For many days, Mhatre was absent from college without any explanation. He'd been working on a sculpture of his own, and when he finished it, he placed it in the corridor of the JJ School of Arts in a very prominent position so that there was no chance that his very angry principal would miss out on what he had made. What he had produced was this, a plaster sculpture called Mandira Patagamani, or To the Temple, which depicts a typical Maharashtrian Hindu woman dressed in a 9-yard sari on her way to the temple. This, although it was a student project, was path-breaking for how realistic the features of the woman were, as well as how accurately it reproduced the way clothes look on an Indian woman. Until this time, British art teachers and critics did not consider Hindu sculpture as high art in the classical sense. But when Mandira Patagamani was released, was made accessible to the masses, an art critic in the Times of India, which was then a British-run newspaper, called it the finest art of sculpture to ever emerge from India. The JDA School of Arts went on to buy the sculpture from Mhatre for the whopping sum of 1,200 rupees, a massive amount of money at the time. And Mandir Patagamani continues to have a home at the JDA School of Arts. Mhatre was a founder member of an art society called the Art Society of India. If you look at the logo, can you make out 1918? It was established over 100 years ago and moved to its present location at the Opera House Junction about 80 years ago to encourage Indian art and Indian artists. It continues to remain here, and not only does it survive, it also thrives. Because a few times a week, in a very modest room, the Art Society of India organizes study sessions for both professionals and for amateurs, where they paint and sketch live human models a few times a week. This is right at the Opera House Junction. Traffic is whizzing by, it must be noisy, but no one really looks up to see a century-old art institution right in the art district of Bombay. The founder president of the Art Society of India was this man, Savlaram Halvankar. You see him working on a portrait of Jagannath Shankar Sheth. Remember the man who helped build the playhouse in Grant Road? This portrait survives and hangs in the headquarters of the BMC, where my friends at the Khaki Tours have recently started curating a heritage walk inside the building. Haldankar's daughter Geeta was a teenager in the 1940s. Usually, she would be dressed in a very simple skirt and blouse, but on Diwali day, she dressed up in her mother's 9-yard sari. After lighting a lamp, she was just walking back into the house with it when her father saw her in the doorway, and then and there decided that he is going to paint his daughter. Imagine being a teenager and standing frozen in the same position for 3 hours for 3 days consecutively. But that is what Geeta Haldankar had to do. And what her father, Savlaram, produced was this, a painting called The Glow of Hope. If you're an artist, you will know that if you paint with watercolors, it is very difficult to make corrections. But Haldankar was determined to prove and succeeded in proving that one could create the perfect portrait at the first attempt with just watercolors. The story doesn't end here. Geeta Haldankar survived and lived and thrived until the ripe old age of 102 and passed away just 4 years ago. Here she is on her 100th birthday with a lamp in the foreground next to the painting that made her a part of history. And here is Mumbai's favorite cartoonist Morparia's interpretation of what Haldankar's painting would have looked like if Geeta Haldankar was alive in today's day and age and a young girl now. This painting hangs in a gallery in Mysore, which is otherwise full of paintings by Raja Ravi Verma, which is why many people think that this painting was painted by him too. Raja Ravi Verma was a pioneer not only in art, but in making art accessible to the public. He hit upon the idea of mass producing paintings, that is, using machines to produce multiple copies of the same painting. He set up the Raja Ravi Verma Fine Arts Lithographic Press. Litho means stone. Lithography is the technique that uses small individual stones to reproduce every hue and every color of a painting to make a perfect copy. while Verma's lithographic press eventually settled in Madhavli near Lonavala, as you can see in the fine print at the bottom of the print. We know for sure that this fine arts lithographic press started off in Bombay. It was set up with the support of his wealthy patron, Seth Govardhan Das Khatau. Some sources say that the first home, the original home of Raja Ravi Verma's printing press was right here in the Govardhan Das building in Girgaon. It is because of Verma's foresight in making art affordable to the middle class that you and I may be very familiar with this painting. We may have prints of it on our walls, we may have it on calendars, we may even have it on coffee mugs. But have you ever wondered who the woman in the painting is? The story goes, follow the arrow. Raja Ravi Verma used to live in Girgaon. Raja Ravi Verma lived in Gamdevi. One day, while he was on his way from his residence in Gamdevi to his fine arts printing press in Girgaon, he came across and met a beautiful Goan woman named Anjani Bai Maltekar. Anjani Bai was beautiful. She was half his age, and he fell madly in love. Anjani Bai had come to Mumbai as a child to learn Hindustani classical music from the gurus of the only gharana in India to bear the name of a suburb of a locality of Bombay. Anjani Bai learned from the Bhindi Bazar gharana of Hindustani classical music. After years of practice, Anjani Bai debuted her first performance at the tender age of 16 at the Muzaffarabad Hall, which is very, very close to Grant Road Station and continues to survive today, although it is in ruins. Anjani Bai was such a sensation at her debut that for the rest of the year, she traveled up and down the length and breadth of India, performing at the invitation of princely states. Legend has it that Anjani Bai became the muse of Raja Ravi Verma and modeled for him. Which is why when you are looking at Verma's images of goddesses, you may just be looking at his version of Anjani Bai as a divine being. Have you ever wondered why Hindu goddesses are always dressed in 9-yard saris? Maybe it's because that's what Anjani Bai used to wear, and those are the clothes that Raja Ravi Verma chose to make goddesses look like human beings. Anjani Bai belonged to the Kalavanta community, whose traditional occupation was to sing for the gods in temples. Unfortunately, this community was also looked down upon by society. Let us now listen to the voice of another woman singer from Anjani Bai's community, whose voice has traveled far, far away from Bombay, from India, and even from Earth. The recording we listened to was a composition in the Rag Bhairavi, recorded right inside this building, which is just around the corner from Anjani Bai's home. The artist we listened to was a legend by the name of Kesarbai Kerkar. At the height of her fame, she commanded so much respect and so much power that she was in a position to ban her own patrons from attending her concerts. But her patrons, wealthy businessmen, would be so desperate to listen to Kesarbai that they would sneak into the concert hall and sit under the stage while she was performing, just for the privilege of listening to Kesarbai sing. In the 1970s, NASA launched 2 spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. On board these spacecraft were 2 gold-plated copper discs called the Voyager records, which were loaded with images and sounds from planet Earth. Kesarbai's recordings were selected as the most perfect example of Indian classical music and included as a part of those Voyager records. Both Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 have traveled far, far beyond the solar system and are 18 and 22 billion kilometers away from us. If life exists beyond Earth, maybe someone other than human beings has had the privilege of listening to Kesarbai sing Jaat kahan ho, akeli goriya. Where are you going alone, O fair one? She asks, as though to the voyagers themselves. The foundation stone where Kesarbai recorded Jaat kahan ho was laid by the husband of the young woman whom you see in the picture. While Kesarbai came from a community that was often ostracized by society, this young woman came from a Brahmin community in Tamil Nadu. She scandalized conservative Chennai society by choosing to marry a man who was 20 years older than her and not even Indian. The couple had to escape to Bombay to get married and lived in Bombay for a year to allow the furor that their marriage had caused to die down in Madras. In Bombay, this young woman attended a performance by the Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova and was completely enthralled. It just so happened that this woman and Anna then happened to be co-passengers on a ship from Bombay to Australia. Naturally, they got talking. Anna Pavlova inspired her to reinvent ancient Indian dance forms. The dance form that this woman chose was called Sadhir, a dance form that was typically performed in temples by women from a community that was considered not so respectable. This woman took out the erotic elements from the dance form Sadhir, and Rukmini Devi Arundel pioneered the art form of Bharatanatyam as we know it today. She made it acceptable for women from all communities to learn Bharatanatyam. She went on to become the first Indian woman to be nominated to the Rajya Sabha. At one point, she was even offered the presidentship of India, but said no. If she'd said yes, perhaps the fate of the classical arts in Mumbai and in India would have been very different. While Rukmini Devi remained a classical dancer throughout her career, this young man started off with Kathak. He was the only boy in a class full of girls, but he loved dance and he didn't let anything stop him. He lived in a Parsi colony very close to the area that we've been exploring. And as a student in Bombay, was inspired by the performance of an American dance company in Poddar College in Bombay. He wanted to learn contemporary dance. Over the next 8 years, he traveled across 45 countries performing dance, sometimes traveling really cheap in cargo ships with vegetables and goats for company. He also learned Bharatanatyam, Kathakali, and Maripuri and integrated it into his performances. This man is whom we now know as the magnificent Astha Debu, who blurred the lines between classical and contemporary and who passed away in Mumbai just last year. After traveling the world, one of Debu's first performances back in Bombay was at Prithvi Theatre. But before Prithvi was a performance venue, it was also the name of a theatre company headed by Prithviraj Kapoor, in whose memory Prithvi Theatre was later built. You can see him right there in the middle, in mid-performance, with that famous mustache. In his early days, Prithviraj was mostly a theatre actor. He was offered one of his first roles in cinema by this man, Ardeshir Irani. After many years of exhibiting and distributing foreign films in India, Irani decided to make the first 100% Indian talkie film. Irani didn't have sophisticated stages on which he could shoot. Neither did he have any fancy recording equipment. He chose to hide microphones just outside of range of the camera so that it wouldn't be captured, but the artist's voices could still be captured. And very interestingly, he could only shoot his film between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. at night. Why? Do you see the red dot in the photo? That's the location of Irani's studio. It's right next to the railway line. Trains don't fly only between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. in Bombay. It was the only time when Irani could afford to shoot his movie. Despite all these struggles, he went on to produce and release Alam Ara, the first Indian talking film. You can see Prithviraj Kapoor's name as he's featured right there in the Starcast. It was released in Girgaon, actually, released right there in Girgaon in the Majestic Cinema. It was such a stupendous success that tickets for this film were bought on the black market for 20 times the price. As always, casting is the most important process in filmmaking. For the female lead, Irani rejected all the existing leading actresses. Why? Because in an era of silent movies, none of them could speak Hindi properly. Instead, he chose to cast a fresh face, Zubeda, who went on to become the first Indian woman whose voice was heard in a movie. Since the movie had a lot of action scenes, he chose to cast as his leading man the leading action star of the day, a man called Master Vittal. The problem is, as it turned out, Master Vittal was a terrible actor, and Irani had to change the script of his movie to make Vittal's character either mute or unconscious throughout the movie. The studio where Irani shot the first Indian talking film is now in ruins and is now occupied, sadly, by garages. Irani's production company also produced the first indigenously produced 100% color film, a film called Kisan Kanya. This film was written by none other than the legendary Sadat Hasan Manto. Manto, who described himself as a Chalta Phirta Bombay, usually described the people of Bombay in his writings, never the places, but he made an exception for the bridge that is right next to Irani's studio. In this excerpt, he talks about how after a long day of work at the studio, he would put a few hundred rupees into his pocket and cross the Pavan Pul or the Pavan Pul to go to Forest Road and gamble. The excerpt says, वो रोज फारस रोड के कीमार खाने में नाप तोलकर एक मुकर्रा रकम हार रहा था. हर रोज शाम को अपनी जेब में 200 रुपए डालकर वो पवन पिले का रुख करता. What is this Pavan Pila? Manto lived in a very congested part of Bombay. It is only when he took this bridge, the Pavan Pul or the Bridge of Winds, right next to Irani studio, that he would feel the fresh breath of sea air which would refresh him. Incidentally, Manto's Pavan Pul is now renamed after Ardeshir Irani as the Ardeshir Irani Bridge. This man was for a while the manager of Irani studio. But his greatest achievement is something that most of us have forgotten. You must have heard of Dada Saheb Phalke, the man who made India's the first feature film, Raja Harishchandra. I want to talk not about Dada Saheb Phalke, but about Dada Saheb Torne. Torne decided to adapt an existing mythological play called Pundalik and make it into a film. Both Raja Harishchandra and Pundalik were released at the Coronation Cinematograph in Girgaon. Do you see the red dot? That's approximately where Harkisandas Hospital stands now, and it is where the Coronation Cinematograph was earlier. Pundalik was released almost a year before Raja Harishchandra. But still, most of us have never heard about it. Why? Partly because it was simply a recording of an existing play. Partly because it was a little too short and perhaps didn't qualify to be called a feature film. And partly because it was processed not in Mumbai, but in London, which is why it was never acknowledged as the first 100% Indian feature film. If it had been, perhaps the Indian government would recognize an individual's lifetime contributions to cinema, not with the Dada Saheb Phalke Awards, but with the Dada Saheb Torne Awards. Torne shot his film in the Wadi of Seth Mangaldas Market King. This is just 10 minutes away from where Ardeshir Irani shot Alamara, a once legendary theatre called Naz, which was the site of the grand premieres of Bollywood blockbusters, now occupies that Wadi where he shot his film. At Naz, families were permitted to book entire boxes of seats, like at an opera house, like at an opera theatre, for an outing at the movies. The management of Naz had also organized a creche where trained attendants would babysit children while their parents could watch the film undisturbed at no extra charge. A privilege that I'm sure many harried young parents today would happily pay for. Dada Saheb Phalke's film Lanka Dahan was released when Naz was a was a theatre called the West End Cinema. It was so popular that it had shows every hour, starting from 7 in the morning all the way up to midnight. And when the actor portraying Lord Ram would appear on screen, the entire audience in the theatre would prostrate themselves before him. Another film released at the West End was a Marathi film called Shama Sundar. The producers of this film were very clever. They pulled off something which made the audiences come back to watch the film for a second time. What they did is they inserted a new reel with a new action sequence, which was so exciting that it persuaded audiences to pay up all over again just to come back and watch the same movie just for those scenes. Just opposite Naz, in a chawl, lived for a while a Goan woman called Sushila Lotlikar. Sushila Lotlikar, after marriage, was known as Vandana Mishra. This Konkani-speaking woman from Goa became a star of the Marathi stage. In one of her most famous tragic love stories, her suicide scene was so popular, so well known that audiences who came to watch the play would demand that she would come onto stage and die again and again and again. But when financial troubles came her way, she moved from Marathi theatre to the more lucrative Marwari and Gujarati theatre, despite not knowing a single word of Marwari or Gujarati. In her autobiography, Me Mithachi Bauli, Vandana Mishra writes about how, like a little salt doll, which can dissolve into and blend into the vast sea, she, who was a Konkani-speaking woman from Goa, blended in with all the communities of Mumbai: Konkani, Marathi, Gujarati, and Marwari. Vandana Mishra was introduced to those Gujarati theatre producers by the owner of a jewelry shop right there on Lamington Road. His name was Vishnu Panta Pagnis. Although he was a jeweler, Pagnis was cast in the role of Sant Tukaram in a film, and he portrayed his character as a very kind and gentle man. Sant Tukaram became the first Marathi film to be screened continuously for 52 weeks in theatres. It was judged one of the 3 best films at the Venice Film Festival in the 1930s, and at a show at a village in India, where the village had actually less than 300 residents. Over 1,500 people came up to watch the film. Pagnis was so convincing in his role as Santa Tukaram that people began to put up his photo in their houses and in their temples. Pagnis himself began to live the role and started dressing up as Tukaram even in real life, which is why every week Pagnis would be taken out in a palki or a procession throughout Girgaon, where hundreds of people would rush to touch his feet, thinking that they are getting the blessings of Santa Tukaram himself. Let us move from Pagnis, the jeweler who became an actor, to an actual jewelry shop that still survives very close to where his shop was. Pagnis's shop would have catered to commoners. This shop would have catered to royalty. N. Bhau Jewelers still survives very close to the Opera House Junction. One of its designers was a young man named Ambaji Shinde. Soon after India became independent, some royal families began to sell off their jewels to support themselves. The famous New York jeweler Harry Winston came to Bombay to buy up these jewels and sell them to the West. When he was here, he met Ambaji Shinde and recruited him and made him the chief designer of Harry Winston jewelry in New York for over 3 decades. Shinde soon earned the trust of celebrity clients like the Queen Elizabeth and the actress Sophia Loren. Here, you see the actress Elizabeth Taylor wearing one of his creations on the night she won an Oscar. Taylor had recently had a surgery on her throat. Shinde very skillfully designed a neck piece that would cover the scar of that surgery on such an important day. Over 3 decades with Harry Winston, Shinde created thousands and thousands of designs for jewelry, which were compiled into a coffee table book, which are about nothing but just the designs themselves. While Western divas sought after Shinde's jewelry, middle-class women from Mumbai flocked to attend the theatre performances of the theatre actress that you see on the left to find out what was the latest in terms of fashion in jewelry. Can you see her on the left? Can you see how elegantly she's standing? Can you see how flirtatiously she's holding that fan? Now look again. Is that a woman or a man? At a time when acting on stage was not considered a respectable profession for women, a man who came to be known as Bala Gandharva played women's roles on stage to perfection. So perfect were his female mannerisms that women would come to the Royal Opera House, which was his stomping ground, which is where he performed very often, not just to see his performances, but also to see just how he had draped his sari so that they could go home and dress like a man who dressed like a woman. At the height of his fame, Bal Gandharva was even asked to endorse products. Try to imagine in 2021, a male theatre actor dressed in female clothing paid a ton of money to pose in ads. There has been a long line of art personalities you've spoken about, and a common thread running through all of them, as I'm sure you've noticed. That thread enters this photograph and splits into multiple threads. On the extreme left is the music director, Basant Desai, who gave hit after hit while working with the producer of the film Santa Tukaram. Right in the middle is Bal Gandharva, whom we just saw in his old age. Bal Gandharva is looking at Anjani Bai Malpekar, the woman who was the muse of Raja Ravi Verma in her old age. Anjani Bai taught music to the great Thumri legend Begum Akhtar, who's sitting right next to her. And Anjani Bai also taught music to Lata Mangeshkar, who's looking right at you. The threads that connect these artists continue to grow longer and longer. Take a look at this map. I'm sure during the presentation, during my talk, you must have noticed that the number of dots has been gradually increasing in the background. The red dot that you see right there is the Royal Opera House, the last place I spoke about where Bal Gandharva performed night after night. Each dot marks some spot, some residence, or some performance venue related to the artist that I've spoken about. Take a good look, and now look at this map. This map shows all the stories of all the artists and entertainers whose stories are with us in Khaki as of right now. Every green dot represents a story of an artist or an entertainer that remains to be told. Can you see how closely clustered they are to each other and how much more there is to discover? Every single personality I've spoken about today lived and worked in this very small area. They originated art forms, they reinvented them, made them more accessible, made them more respectable, made them more popular, but most importantly, made them thrive well into the 21st century. Some of these artists are still producing art. One day, I hope that you and I can take a walk into these streets and lanes and see these stories come alive on the streets themselves. But for now, I hope I've at least begun to convince you that it is Girgaon, which is the original art and entertainment district of Mumbai. See you for a heritage walk very soon. We conduct 4 to 5 heritage walks just in the area that I've mentioned. That's me right there in my element in the middle of a heritage walk that I hope to see you at very soon. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you.
Thank you. Can I be on the screen? Hi. Thanks, Mrigank, for a fabulous talk. I'm sure it changed the way people are looking at things, right? So I can see a lot of positive comments out there, but there are not too many questions. one question asked, both the questions actually are asked by Namrata. And the first question was, is Playhouse still there? And then she said you answered the question because she asked it before you revealed it. Second question was, is the Niroy studio open even today?
Yes, it is. It's run by his granddaughter, Gayatri Neroy Desai. It's very much accessible.
So, any other questions from anybody? We are happy to take it now, or we can call it a day. So I'll just read out. It says, thanks, awesome, Dr Mrigank, amazing session, kudos Mrigank, totally wonderful, wonderful insights. Mrigank brilliantly put together dots. Lots of, yeah, I can just see a lot of positive comments which are there. So hope to have you guys for some of our amazing walks in this area, and which Mrigank will host. So I think so Lamington Lore, his new walk is coming soon. So hope to see you guys there. All right. With that, we call it a day. Thanks. So Namrata Wagmare saying thanks, Mrigi, with a heart. So great. Anita Ayavale says we'll wait to take this tour in person. Great. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye. See you.